Lancaster is going to give us the main universal language of African people that could never be changed.
That's right.
Because your heart is a drum. Without any further ado, Brother Siddiqui.
Abaragani. 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 For those who are coming from the different things, we say, what's happening? What's the news? And the news is us. I'm going to first do the song, the prayer. I'm going to do it in the ancient language of Edo, which comes from the people that live in that region, which is now known as Nigeria. But these are the indigenous people of that region. This prayer talks about giving honor and praise to that which created everything. And then I will do an ancestral song for all the ancestors, and I'm going to translate it after I get there. And then I'm going to do something specifically for Brother Son Martin. So just bear with me. Akoda Mojuba Egunire. Egunale. Mojuba. Egunde balese. Olodumare. Ibare o Egunire. Are always with us. We give thanks and praise to all the ancestors who sit at the feet of God. The ancestors are good. Talking. Do you hear us? They say, we are talking, we are speaking to you. Do you hear us? We've been screaming. We've been screaming for you to hear us. That's what the ancestors are saying. They're upset that we are not listening. We say, they say, you see the youth, you say the youth are lost. They're not lost. If they're following you, they are not lost. Unless you are, and then they are lost because they're following you. So there's no need, there's no need. There's no need for more to join us. There's a need for more to pay attention to us. We did not leave you in the dark. We left a light on. We left a light on. We left a light on. And it's up to you to see it. this one. How many of you, they say, when you see his book, he points to the light. He shows you the symbols right here. And you don't see, and you don't speak, and you don't listen, and you go, "Gee, what is wrong? It's the light bright enough. It's not the light bright enough." Okay. This year, Shango ruled, and he is flashing the lightning to bring more light for you to see. So when you see the lightning flash, look for them. They'll be standing there watching to see who is watching them when the lightning flashes. And God says, the fire that he carries is a light for you to see. Brother Tony Martin was a teacher and still is teaching. But his spirit is still with us. His teachings are still with us. In Africa, we have what we call the jolly. Some of you may know the word is grill, which is French. And the French mistook the jollies for storytellers, but the jollies were more than that. They were historians. They were teachers. They were educators. They were reminders of the culture. The first jolly that we recognize and give honor to, most of us, is Hotel. And you see what he left the world. He is a jolly. The song I sing, although it may have Arabic connotations, the song is in honor of the jolly. Those who are educators of us, who are our historians, who are the carriers and the bearers of light, of which Tony Martin was truly one of them, and is still one of them. So this song is an honor and tribute to him. The rhythm I'm playing, we know as Lamba, but it is called the rhythm of the jolly. True. Now I am by myself, so I can only play a part of it. I'll try to incorporate as I go. But what you hear is the basic pattern that the drum would play in honor of the jolly. Hey, jolly, hey, jolly, hey, jolly, 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 Jolly Allah. Peace be unto you, the one who is the keeper of the secrets. That's what the Jolly was also called and known for. In Nigeria, they called them Babalao, the keeper of the secrets. But so the Jollies were that also. So that the first part says, peace be unto you, keeper of the secrets. Hey, Jolly Allah, alaikum, Jolly Allah, alaikum, Jolly Allah, alaikum, Jolly Allah. For those who do not know, Allah is a reference to the Almighty God. And that statement says, peace be unto he who listens and speaks with the word of Allah, with the word of God. Because the Jollies were not only entrusted with the secrets, they were also entrusted with the word. And when they spoke to the people, they spoke to them about their history, about their culture, from whence they came, and they were given honor and respect as if they were messengers from God, and they truly were. My Jolly was a man named Jimo Kuliate. Jimo is with the other Jollies that went before him. You see what I see? When you see me, you see. And when I speak to you about these things, thanks Jimo. My other Jolly was Abdullah Kamara, who was ballet master for Ballet National du Senegal for 22 years. They taught me. They sat me down and made me be a sponge with them, so I can speak these things and translate these things to you because of them. And the ultimate one for me is a woman. Her name was Catherine Dunham. She used to call me to her room on 10th Street in East St. Louis and say, come, brother, I have things to teach you. And she taught me. And she said that when you do what you do, you have to do it for the people. And so I don't do this for fun. I don't do this because I'm trying to make a name. I do this because my ancestors instructed me to do this for you. And I'm just being what they asked me to be, is a light for them and for you to know. So when I speak these things, I'm not doing this just as Siddiqui. I'm also speaking for Catherine. I'm also speaking for Jimo, for Abdullah, for Chancellor, because he was my mentor. For John Henry Clark, because he was my mentor. For Dr. Tony Martin, because he was a mentor. These people have all touched my life, and there were many more. And they're speaking through me now because they want you to know. Now this is not a game. Don't come here, say you're African, and be something else when you leave. You are what you are because you are the people that come from the sun. You are the darkness that shines and the light that shines from the darkness in you. Do not misunderstand. You come from the womb into the light. You come from a darkness that has light within. And you bring that light with you when you come here. So shine. And I'm for those, I do not mean to offend. This is ancestral energy flowing, and I'm doing what they asked me to do. You know, and I'm almost on the verge of tears myself because this message is not just for you. It's for me.
I know y'all feel that electricity flowing between you and me, right? Yuri and Brother Sidrak up. We're going to introduce the panelists and we're going to get going. I want to give a big shout out to the energy that was just brought in the room.
Yes.
There was plenty already here, but y'all feel the other energy?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Brother Singar and Baba Siddiqui, for bringing the energy to us. I want to welcome every one of you for coming here this afternoon, and especially our distinguished scholars who are with us. But before we do anything else, I just want to recognize Mama Pearl, our elder queen. She's 101 years old. This is our queen. She came all the way from North Carolina to be here with us today. As we're here to honor our brother Tony Martin, as a Trinidadian, I could tell you that he made us very proud.
Yeah.
We were so proud of Tony. And as I read through a lot of the articles from the newspapers back in Trinidad, the word brilliant is the consistent word throughout the all of the articles. But there was one message. One of the writers said that Tony left a hole that one can only hope that the up-and-coming scholars and youth might be able to fill. And that resonated with me because it reminded me of another brilliant ancestor of ours, Dr. John Henry Clark. When that question was raised to him on many occasions, and in particular when Malcolm X passed, and Dr. Clark's words were, bury the man and continue to plan. And so, as we honor Tony, who did his work, he did his job, he did what he was supposed to do. I want to ask you to remember Dr. Clark's words, to bury the man and continue to plan. And how are we going to do that? So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Brother Sidrak.
Thank you, Sister Eureka. Indeed. African people, how are you feeling today? One more time, you could do better than that. How do you feel? Good. There's a lot of powerful energy in this house. Yes, indeed. Well, as the sister said, as we continue to lift up Brother Tony Martin, don't forget, the work is not done. It's only just begun. All right? Some wise person said a long time ago, let this be the first day for the rest of your life. And it's not just your life, but it's what you do in that life that counts, okay? We want to recognize the panel, our esteemed panel here that will be, speaking to us this evening, paying homage and respect to the brother who has passed. And first, we want to go with the Sister Wangaza Bandele. Give her a round of applause, please. Indeed. Thank you, sister, for being on the panel. Of course, a brother who is no stranger, but yet he is also a very esteemed brother, former university professor, Brother Acklin Lynch. The next member of the panel is another giant and scholar among us. He has written several books trying to bring out the light, like the brother was saying earlier, that is in us, and continue to enlighten us. Okay, Brother Tony Browder. Almost forgot your name, Institute for Common Knowledge and Guidance. And last but not least, our esteemed President General of the UNIA, Brother Singo Baye, Jan. Let's hear it for them. Let's wait for our esteemed panel. I'd also like to let you know that Sister Sharika Sharikiana is in the house. So she probably will be saying a few words later on in the program, as far as I understand. And I also see Sister Nikichi Taifa here as well. I don't know if she'll be speaking. As many of you know, we lost Brother Kalanji not too long ago. And we're going to be doing a memorial service for him this Saturday. And I was made to understand also that those of you who would like to make a contribution towards that end, you can also do that here later on in the program, okay? Without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone on back to Brother Singo. Singo bye.
Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
It is very important for us to acknowledge all of the great spirit energy that's in the house.
Yay.
Too many names, but I want to acknowledge all the UNIA presidents that are in the house, all the way from Philly and here in Banneker City. I want to acknowledge all of the UNIA members, and I want to acknowledge all the Africans, because whether you realize it or not, you too are members.
That's right.
You just haven't learned how to pay your dues yet. As the ninth successor to the Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, it's my pleasure to be here. I actually had the opportunity of sitting at the feet of the leading teacher, Honorable Charles L. James, who worked with Marcus Garvey, took a course with Marcus Garvey, but also before him, Honorable Thomas W. Harvey. Those two President Generals knew Tony Martin very, very well. They both officially appointed him as the official historian of the Garvey UNIA legacy.
Hey.
Tony is very with us now in spirit as he makes his transition. He was an active member with us in New York, also in Detroit, New York, and in DC, and wherever he went. But I'm going to be the first presenter, and then later on we're going to go to the others. But I want all of you to know that the reason we're doing this memorial service is because we're not going to let you forget that the man will be buried, but the legacy lives in you and me. And it's our job to be busy doing the work that Garvey and all those ancestors, too many names, we probably can't even mention them all. Even the ones that you know of, you can't mention them all. It's that many. But they paved the way for us. And it's our responsibility while we're here to do what we came to do. And as Roy Ayers said, we should be in the spirit of the do-do. I'm going to give you a written presentation because sometimes I get in the spirit like the drummer and I can go on and on and on, and all y'all know what I'm talking about. This is my hometown. I feel very close to Dr. Martin. I knew him for a long time. He was a personal friend. I'm very saddened that he's left us, but I'm very happy that you're here right now in the UK, the Alkebalan Revivalist movement, right now in the Caribbean, right now in the Virgin Islands, right now in Canada. They are acknowledging what we're doing right now. So the synchronicity is far bigger than Georgia Avenue and where we are. You hear what I'm saying? And it's not going to stop and end today because this is a giant. Dr. Tony Martin was born February the 21st, 1942 in Trinidad. He departed this life on January the 17th, 2003. 2013. Thank you, Tony. In 1976, he published a very powerful book after he used it in a lot of ways through his studies, and I'll come back to that. It's called Race First.
Yes.
And it is also subtitled The Ideological and Organizational Struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. You don't even have to read the book. You can go to the back and look at some of the research that the brother did on the case of Marcus Garvey, on the trials that he went through all over the world, and believe me, you will know how important Garvey is to you today.
That's right.
Dr. Tony Martin served as one of the pallbearers, along with Marcus Garvey Jr. of Thomas W. Harvey, who worked with Garvey. That was in the 70s, y'all. And we got the Thomas W. Harvey 121 president sitting right here of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
All right.
President General Thomas W. Harvey, in the late 70s, as President General, appointed Dr. Tony Martin because of the work that Tony did as the official historian, because as you know, a lot of people have written on Garvey, a lot of people talk about Garvey, a lot of people think they know Garvey. But really, to come to know Garvey is to do what? Man, woman, know yourself.
That's right.
Marcus Garvey also had a course of African philosophy that was also published by Dr. Tony Martin. I was in Philadelphia when the Honorable Charles L. James commissioned Dr. Martin to publish 22 lessons of a 42-lesson course that was given to Garveyites in the 30s in Canada. Now, the reason it was only 22 lessons is because the 20 lessons will never be published because they were taught to leaders in order to carry on when Garvey left. But I had the honor of taking the course, some of the courses from Honorable Charles L. James before it was published. It's published now in a book, and you can read that book and see that 90% of that book still needs to be studied by us to get it right. Today.
True.
Thank you, Tony. Message to the people. The course of African philosophy is critical. Another one was Race First. Very important. Those are only 2 books that I'll tell you about Tony that are so important. Dr. Tony Martin served as a professor of history and black studies at Wellesley College, Massachusetts. I had the opportunity, brothers and sisters, to visit there and to speak on a program hosted by Dr. Tony Martin in 1986, along with the President General, Honorable Charles L. James at the time, and the Minister of Education and Third Assistant President General, Dr. Leo Berkeley, who is also now an ancestor, who hailed from Montreal, Canada, and went to school with Dr. Julius Garvey and held 9 degrees. Dr. Tony Martin was educated in England and became a barrister at law at Gray's Inn, London. He then studied history. Listen, y'all, because, you know, it's no coincidence that we got our queen up here, and you'll see the connection here in a minute. But he then studied history in the US of A, leading to a PhD from Michigan State University. Y'all will get it later on if you didn't get it, when I look back. His areas of special interest included black nationalism in Afro-America, in the West Indies, and Pan-Africanism, and the history of black political thought. While in Michigan, hear me, studying, he sat at the feet of at least 20 to 30 Garveyites who moved with Garvey. Some of the names, John Zapta, John Vincent, Ruth Smith, who I had the opportunity of meeting, who drove for Marcus Garvey, and Bishop Tucker. Now, many people, I got to stop there on Bishop Tucker, because when I came into UNIA, I heard Bishop Tucker preach. I ain't never heard nobody yet that could preach as good as that bishop did. And he was also the chaplain of the UNIA. And him and Tony were like that. Tony sat at his feet and learned what he knew about Garveyism. I'm telling you, I'm sharing things that you may not know. But you're going to know, because we're videoing it, and I want you to know some things, okay? And you're going to hear a lot today, but it's important. Hear everything, but attend only to that affects you, meaning you got to do your own research.
That's right.
Huh, Dr. Browder?
That's right.
You know, y'all might hear some good things, but go check it out.
Yeah.
Make sure it's true to you.
That's right.
The new Marcus Garvey Library, between the early 1980s and the 1990s, Dr. Tony Martin continued to do the work. This humble giant of a professor, I have never seen anybody cooler than Dr. Martin in doing presentations. I call him the cool ruler of Trinidad. And I mean, he used to laugh at that. He used to laugh at that. I know Dr. Lynch like that, but that's a fact, y'all. I mean, and this is not to take nothing away from anybody else, because we got a lot of giants still with us, and we got a lot who went before us. But every one of them had a special trait. Tony was a cool ruler out of Trinidad, y'all, for real. The new Marcus Garvey Library. Over 9 books. I mentioned 2 to you. I'm going to mention some of the others. The new Marcus Garvey Library, Literary Garveyism. Because Garvey, most people know a lot of the politics of Garvey and a lot of the other stuff, but you got to check out Literary Garveyism to understand that the Harlem Renaissance really could have been called the Garvey Renaissance. I'm going to leave that for your research, though. The poetical works of Marcus Garvey. This one.
Yes.
Garvey wrote poems.
Yes.
Tony published them. Literary Garveyism. You'll learn about a whole lot of giants that wrote poems, sang songs. Garvey himself wrote plays. Because see, there is no what? You gotta have culture, right? And there's a famous saying that goes around, there is no culture without agriculture, but I'm gonna tell you the root of it all is culture, because agriculture is the earth, and you come from the earth. So it's culture that we have to have. All right? Anyway, Marcus Garvey Hero. That's a little green book that was written for high school students. So we always talk about we don't have no curriculums. That was written as a high school curriculum. It's just that we got to get teachers to use it.
Yes.
And thank goodness now Jamaica has now put Garvey in the curriculums in Jamaica. Yes. Now that we got a real Garvey in the country. This is the one, y'all, that got me. This one I cry every time I read, and I loan it to somebody. I got to buy another 3 of these copies because this one you got to have. Some people call this book From Slavery to Garvey, but it's called Pan-African Connection, and it's a red book. That one is awesome. I mean, it lays it out. It doesn't just talk about Garvey, the UNIA, and us today. It take you back and show you the line of Pan-Africanism and why it's so important that you not forget your roots of the 20th century. And of course I said race first, and then I have to mention Garvey's writing. I was in the convention when Dr. Tony Martin was commissioned to republish this. Now it's been republished by some others, but you read the introduction that Tony wrote, and you'll understand why we commissioned Tony to republish it versus other people publishing it, because some of the other people's introductions are probably that thick. And they give you their ideology in front of Garvey, but Tony keeps it real and lays it right out. All right? Then he republished that. That's part of the new Marcus Garvey Library. And then he also ran into some problems when he started speaking truth to power about some other people who told the truth about their people being a part of the transatlantic slave trade. So consequently, they tried to attack Tony like they tried to attack everyone, because Tony was a leading professor at Wellesley College, and some of those other folk were there too, and they didn't like the fact that Tony was speaking truth to power, and they tried to attack him, derail him, get him to lose his job, and all of that. They threatened him, sent threatening letters, and did all that. Tony stood up as the cool ruler of Trinidad and spoke truth to power to them. And he said, okay, since they doing that, and they using all of these innuendos and all these accusations when I didn't even write the truth, I just researched it. He said, I'll publish a book. And he did, The Jewish Onslaught. Some of them started to retreat, but some of them kept on coming, and they tried their best, but Tony kept on. And it's a famous interview that was played on WPFW Gerard Ball's show just last week, where Dr. Clark and Dr. Tony was sitting down being interviewed about that whole process. So do your research, brothers and sisters. I'm not going to spend a lot more time. I'm going to move on. That's very important. Because sometimes when we speak the truth, we get under the gun of attack. But when the truth comes from other sources, normally they don't get attacked.
That's right.
That's just how it is. But it's a reason for that, because they don't want the masses of African people, huh, Tony, to catch hold to the truth. Because when the masses of African people catch hold to the truth, they're going to rise up and take charge of their destiny.
All right.
So they don't mind a few talking the truth, but when the truth goes to the many, that's when they get paranoid. Anyway, I learned that from Tony.
Yes.
Because he told me straight up. He said, this is my life. When I met Garvey, I had no choice. You know, as a professor. That's what he said. As a barrister of law and as a historian, I got to tell the truth. He read books out there, and he said, this ain't right. This ain't what I researched. So that's why he got the record straight. So we owe a big service to Dr. Tony Martin, because probably I might not even be here in the 21st century doing what I'm doing, following the legacy of Garvey, and you might not be here hearing this tonight if it were not for him flipping the switch and giving the truth out, because some people were telling falsehoods.
That's right.
Keep the light on.
Now, Amy Ashwood Garvey. Now, a lot of people, and when I came in the UNIA, a lot of people were talking about the differences in the Amy's. And I mean, I was confused, because both was named Amy, both knew each other, both came from Jamaica, and I didn't know what was going on, but Tony set the record straight, because that Amy Ashwood Garvey had tremendous contributions to us too, even though she was a thorn in the side of Amy Jocks Garvey and Marcus Garvey for the rest of her life. She also was a true leading Pan-Africanist. So Dr. Martin published a book. Now that book is not a part of the new Marcus Garvey Library as such. Well, yes it is. That one is. The other one I'm going to mention to y'all isn't, but that one was. Because also Tony published books, and I'll get to that. The course of African philosophy I talked about, Amy Ashwood I talked about. Now, the reason I mention those books, and I'm going to hold up Amy's.
Please.
Here it is.
Yes.
And I got this in hardback form from Tony because it was another book done on Amy Ashwood. But this sister was tough. She dated presidents of African countries. Unfortunately, she dipped out on Marcus Garvey, and I gotta tell this, she dipped out on Marcus Garvey less than 3 months after they were married, after being warned not to do that, and Garvey and her got trapped going to Canada with alcohol that was open in her bag, and she was warned by Garvey, and that's why he annulled the marriage. And it's all documented. And her story, the good stuff. And I had to share that because sometimes people call me up all the time and say, well, Amy Jocks never left the name of Garvey, you know. But the fact of the matter is, she understood how powerful Garvey was, and she never let go Garveyism in her own way. Now, as I move forward, let me move forward a little swifter here. In 1986, Honorable Charles L. James, the President General, who I studied under, who appointed me co-chairman of the Centennial Committee in '87 of the legacy of Garvey, he also had Tony publish the course of African philosophy, and he also commissioned him as the official historian of the UNIA-ACL. Honorable Charles L. James was the last living student taught the course directly by Marcus Garvey, and he wanted to make sure that Tony was the one that published the course so nobody took nothing out. And if you read the course, you're going to see an intro by Honorable Charles L. James, because he took the course, scored the highest on the course, and the course at one time was deep, y'all. You got to understand, Garvey wrote that, and Garvey instructed the course in 1938 and left us in 1940. Okay? And many people thought the UNIA was gone when Garvey could no longer be in the United States in 1927. Wrong. The UNIA continued through Thomas W. Harvey, Honorable Sherrill, after Stewart, and went on to Honorable Charles L. James. All of them took the course of African philosophy from Garvey. All right. Now, he also appointed, Honorable Charles L. James appointed me District Commissioner of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And he always said to me, Senghor, never forget that Dr. Tony Martin is envied. There's a lot of people out here jealous of him because he is not only a great writer, he will stand up and speak truth about the UNIA-ACL and Garveyism, and too many others are interested more so in getting paid. So let me move on. As serving as the co-chair of the Centennial Committee, I learned a lot from Dr. Martin. Because for me, I could call him up, I could talk to him. And Tony was a consultant to me when I was ready from time to time. When my brother Jackson Bay left, I didn't know whether I should leave, but Tony told me, where you going? He said Pan-Africanism all over the world is connected to Garveyism, and that's what I've been writing about. He said, so stand firm where you are. Mrs. James, who is now an ancestor, Estelle James, who was Honorable Charles L. James's wife, who left us here in Washington, Banneker City, said the same thing to me. She said, Senghor, stick with Brother Battle, but remember, always consult Dr. Tony Martin. All right? Now, in beginning to close, let me say this. Certainly, Tony is a legend of the 20th and 21st century Garveyism. His works speak volumes. He traveled the world speaking truth everywhere, as well as publishing books. But not only that, Tony built and managed his own publishing company, the Majority Press, and made sure that distribution was on time. In addition to his own books, other books and authors were published by Majority Press. This is one by Tony, though, in nobody's backyard. And this very important one. Y'all see what this is about, right? Who's it about? Who's it about, brother?
It's about the Grenada Revolution with Maurice Bishop.
Right.
June.
Very important. Because a lot of people weren't telling the truth. Tony published a book, and that's volume 1 of it. It's a volume 2 to it, too. And then here's Guinea's Other Sons by Maureen Warner Lewis. Powerful. Published by Tony or Majority Press. And it's a lot, but I'm only sharing a few with y'all because I don't want you to think Tony was just about writing about Garvey or just about getting books out. And then Eyes to My Soul by Tyrone Powers. Very critical. All right, so y'all, now I'm telling you the books later on, y'all do your research because this is a very important one too. because nobody want to publish this. But this brother came to Tony Martin, and Tony said, let's get this out, because this is very key, all right? Now, thanks to the research of Dr. Martin, the world has gained knowledge of the legacy works, words, and deeds of the right excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the UNIA-ACL. While there have been many writers, authors, and historians, and books, and some good ones too, on Marcus Garvey and the UNIA-ACL, no one has come close to the works of the new Marcus Garvey Library, written and published by Dr. Tony Martin. Dr. Martin sacrificed so much for Africans, both at home and abroad, certainly as he moves through his last rite of passage into the ancestral whirlwind. Spiritually, with all those great ancestors we called earlier, he will be joined by so many gigantic ancestors. We shall really miss our brother Tony. We really will. I know I'll miss him. I was trying to get with him for several months. Didn't have no idea he was going through some trials and tribulations, and then all of a sudden I got the call Tony had checked out. So you never know when you're going to be called, y'all. So, but certainly we have to grow up and be more African-centered in everything. Tony's son, most people don't even know Tony had a son. He had it late like Renoko. You know, I used to tease him all the time. I said, y'all brothers, wait till y'all get all old and y'all have children. It's a good thing, though. It's a good thing because his son was at the funeral and read something to folks. That's right. So he got a living, physical legend. And you know, Marcus Garvey Jr. had two powerful sons who left, who when Marcus Garvey left, they were little. Y'all know Marcus Garvey left us in 1940. Dr. Julius Garvey was born in 1933. Marcus Garvey Jr. was born in 1930. Y'all see what I'm talking about? And Amy Josh Garvey raised those boys, really. But guess what? Both of them are with us today.
That's right.
And they both are staunch Garveyites. And I hope and pray that his mother, who wrote this book, for children, little children, and was published by Majority Press. So what I'm saying to y'all brothers and sisters is Tony touched so many lives, and he had a great son. And what you're going to hear today from others is some great, I'm sure some great information, and I want to thank them for taking time out to come into honor, because I know the life works is tough. You know, it says, you know, man can be a disagreeable beast. Oh yeah, my 3-year-old elder, and I say 3-year-old because she's 3 digits. You know, and she looks so beautiful and young. She's nodding up here because we're not saying, brothers and sisters, that all y'all ain't doing the work. But what we are saying is we haven't done the work well enough. Because our children are crying and dying all over the world, and ancestors still waiting and watching when we got brothers and sisters like the great Dr. Ackland Lynch, the great Tony Browder, right here still with us, and the great Magaza. See, and I know for a fact, Sister Magaza is dealing with a lot of very important work. So it's important for us brothers and the UNIA people to recognize that we understand that we're in the age of Aquarius, y'all. And we ain't got a lot of time to be playing around. And you heard that earlier in the drum call. You heard it in the libation. I'm sure you're going to hear it today. But guess what? We are the greatest human beings on the planet with the melanin that we got. So there's nothing that we can't do. And in closing, as Marcus Garvey said, Tony Martin always said it, that we can change this thing in 24 hours. If we get busy, if we only know yourself. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over. Oh, by the way, I want to thank Shariki Ama and Holly Garima. Holly Garima's on travel. I want to put a big hand together. And I want to say to y'all, you're going to get your turn too, but you got to turn right now. And this is the way you can contribute to this program. Buy a book from Sankofa. Go to the cafe and get something. That's the contribution we want y'all to make. Yes. Absolutely.
I'm not going to say much. Just thank you very much for coming. We're so glad that that Tony Martin can be celebrated, his work in life, in this space. We feel very honored to have that happen here. And we're also going to pass out a mailing list for any of you who want to have this kind of, be aware of this kind of event or plan. How come they can hear you, they can't hear me?
You got a yelling lip.
Okay, I said thank you so much for coming. We're very honored that Sankofa could be a space where this kind of event to honor Tony Martin could be held. We are very humbled by that, and we're always very happy to have our sisters and brothers here with us on the panel, Akram, Wangazi, Tony, and Sangor, and Paula, who works very hard with Sankofa all the time, and thank all of you for coming. I'm not sure how you heard about the event, but I think that the grapevine is live and well.
Yes.
If you're not already on the email list, I'm going to send this around so you can please join it, and thank you again for coming.
And again, I want y'all put your black hands together for Sudiama and for Sankofa. An institution we must have, we must support. If this is your first time here, buy 3 books. If this is your second time here, get 2. Y'all hear me?
Loud and clear.
And if you've been here and you come here all the time, go to the cafe, get some food, and buy a book.
Yes.
All right. But support Sankofa, y'all. It's very important. Without any further ado, I am honored to know this giant who has been with us. And that is Dr. Ackland Lynch, who is a living legend who also hails from Trinidad. And I'm not going to read his whole thing. I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Lynch. He's going to stay right there and make his presentation. But I know Dr. Lynch not only knew Tony, he knows what Tony was up against in Trinidad, and he knows the terrain, and he also is a leading scholar that we should check for. Dr. Lynch.
And greetings, Mama Pearl. I want to thank you so much for 101 years. I want to thank you so much for 101 years. My mother lived till she was 97 years, and you remind me so much of her. And she used to tell us from very small that it is the way, the truth, and the light.
Yes.
If we understand the way and we follow the truth, then the light will come to us. As the brother who played the drums testified,
Yes.
he says, this represents the light.
Yes.
But how many of us see the light? As he claims, in this period of darkness, the 21st century has entered into a period of darkness. And we must come to grips with that.
Yes.
Not only did we lose our dearful brother recently, Dr. Tony Martin, but we must also remember Dr. Donald Byrd, who just left us. They are the same people in their work. One is simply a musician and the other one is simply a messenger. We must remember Brother Kalanji in his work, because that's very important. And then there's another brother from Trinidad that we don't know his name, who came to New York, named Brother Rudy Eswick, one of the most beautiful human beings that I have known, who when we came to America, he was the brother in Brooklyn that took all of us from Trinidad and guided us through this place called New York, where we all came to become rich as Rockefeller, with gold dust at our feet and a tragic future that could only lead to a painful life. We must remember that. And Rudy helped us. And I don't know if Rudy was a Garveyite, but everything that he said and everything that he did resembled the life of Marcus Garvey. So that in essence, whether he was or not a member, he carried that spirit with him, so that we who came here from 1954 up to the present 2 or 3 weeks ago benefited from this young man. And I want to tell you that there are people like him, completely unknown, whom we owe so much to, because they bring to us, they show us the way, they bring to us the truth, and we see the light. I want to also say that I knew the Martin family in Trinidad. We grew up in Woodbrook, the same place, the same area in Woodbrook. And that I know that Tony would have liked to stay about a week or two more, because tomorrow is Carnival. And I could see Tony playing mass in Trinidad, even when he was sick, dancing and playing mass, and he would have enjoyed every single minute of it. And I know he must have asked for a few minutes more, but you know what? Wherever he is mass that he played somewhere. Because he was not simply an ordinary masquerade. He was that person that brought to us the masquerade of our world. The capitalist world. The communist world. The fake colonialist world. He brought to us the masquerade that all of that represented, that we have taken the Kool-Aid and drank it, and we all believe in it. Up to this day.
Yes.
Come on, Doctor.
So it was as a result of Tony not only bringing to us the genius of Marcus Garvey, but also represented it in a way that he lived the life of Marcus Garvey. And I will assure you that when he was prepared to challenge Wellesley College, when he was prepared to challenge one of the elite schools of the United States on the question of the Jewish relationship to African people and Jewish racism. That there is no other professor in the United States today, yesterday, and even tomorrow who would have taken on that challenge. None whatsoever. I want you all to understand that. I know that because I've spent 40 years in these universities, being fired from one university to another. And even with my sense of daring, even in my so-called radical political life, I didn't dare to take on that subject matter that he took on and confronted them, so that they even charged him in that confrontation. They charged him with rape, they charged him with molestation, they brought all kinds of charges before him. In order to do what? To make certain that he was fired from the university. But he stood his ground. How many of us in here tonight, associated with Howard, with our daily jobs, with all these things, how many of us in here could say, I would do that? Stand my ground.
Hold the line.
While we are prepared, so that to look at Tony is to look at ourselves. Who is the man in the mirror? Is it simply Michael Jackson? Or is it all of us in here? Where is the mirror? And how do we see ourselves as we come to grips with this man who has not left us, because he's right here with us, demanding from us that we articulate to each other what we will do when we confront the mirror. That is a very difficult question. And it becomes central to the work that he did. Firstly, there aren't many scholars who have done what? Spent their life doing the work on Marcus Garvey. Think of them.
That's right.
Lois, perhaps, a Jamaican at the University of the West Indies, another brother at UCLA, but try to find them. Because not only was Marcus Garvey attacked by the intellectuals of the United States and perhaps the world, but someone who prepares to dedicate his life to writing about Marcus Garvey would also suffer the same consequences. And he knew that from day one. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of man is this that is prepared to do that? And we ask that because, you see, when we talk about the Caribbean, we all say, you know, the Caribbean produced a lot of great people.
Yes.
From Toussaint Louverture to Dessalines, from Frantz Fanon to Aimé Césaire, from Leon Damas to Eric Williams, and the list goes on and on and on and on of these brilliant people, from Walter Rodney to George Laming, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But I guarantee you that in the Caribbean, it is necessary still for the children of the Caribbean, and those of you who are from the Caribbean here, who have come here, your children not only didn't know anything about Marcus Garvey or of Tony Martin in Trinidad or Jamaica or any of those places, but they don't know anything about them here, because we send them to schools here. We send our own children to schools here that don't say anything about Tony Martin and Marcus Garvey, and we are not prepared to do it at home, to teach them and say, you must read these books that are put down here. We are not prepared to do that. We are not prepared to do it. So therefore, we come into a bookstore like Sankofa and we don't walk out of here with 3 or 4 books written by Tony Martin or about Marcus Garvey for our grandchildren and children to read it.
That's right.
We must ask ourselves that. We come here because there's another level of entertainment and intellectual discourse. How different are we as men and women in the mirror from those who came before us? And it is exactly that which compelled Tony to do this body of work. To do two things. One, talk about Marcus Garvey, and 2, to confront the integrity and the role and responsibility of the Jewish people from slavery to the present. How dare you do that?
That's right.
And who is prepared to do that? All the way from the president to the unemployed. Who is prepared to do that? Tell me who will do it when we are called. So that's what makes ancestorship so difficult, because Tony still has to live in our consciousness if we don't want to die from this imbalanced, inadequate knowledge of ourselves. And if he must live in our consciousness, then his work must remain essential to our lives. And therefore, let us take a look for a minute at what this work was all about, and why it was so essential for us to gather today, not to remember him, but to commit ourselves, to re-examine those of us who have read, and to examine those who have not read any of his work, to say, I will do that for the next 6 months, for the next year, and I will not simply walk out of here and simply go to work tomorrow and tell somebody, you know, I went to hear a lecture on Tony Martin and we were celebrating his death, to show how black you are and how African you are, and to do all of that, you know, kind of thing, and then simply walk off into darkness. It doesn't make sense to me. It shouldn't make any sense to you. You have a body of work to do, you, before you go on to your children and grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. Because if they don't know, then the 21st century will be a tragic century. Because everything that Tony wrote about and Garvey talked about in the 20th century is what we are witnessing every day. From the fiscal cliff to the new political idiom that you must have the capacity to lie in order to get elected, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Lying has become a way of life in political life. That you must be prepared to engage in violence, whether you use drones or whether you use other kinds of weapons in order to be able to dominate people in a neo-colonial matrix. That you must be prepared to use violence so that by children in your community, so that guns become an operative aspect of their lives and their imagination, whether they see it on television, in the movies, or in their day-to-day activities as they go to school and 27 people are killed in front of their eyes. Garvey said, look, this is happening. But not only did Garvey see the bankruptcy and then the ethical tragedy of capitalism, but Garvey also saw the collapse of communism. He saw it. Garvey saw. He said, yes, Lenin and Trotsky are correct, and they may be moving in the right direction. But after that, Stalin and others brought something to the world that was extremely tragic. And not only did he see it, but those who didn't see it like him, like Padmore and others, later came to see it. The great Padmore, George Padmore, who also came out of Trinidad like C.L.R. James, they became people able to see it. But it is only in Tony's books that you could find that.
That's right.
Nobody else is about to say that. So he had to take on capitalism, he took on communism, and more importantly, he took on the black intellectual middle class. That was prepared to betray us.
Yes.
Whether it is in Ghana or South Africa, whether it is in the Congo or Trinidad, whether it is in Jamaica or the United States of America, whether it is in Brazil or in Colombia, the black intellectual middle class who were prepared to compromise, whether they're living in DC and are politicians or they go to Howard University. That compromise has caused us a great price. So that as Tony and mourned and as Garvey projected, when you stop to think of what has happened in South Africa from Mandela to the present Prime Minister, what is his name? Don't you remember him? What? No, not
Zuma.
Can you imagine? Nobody in Nkrumah, Garvey, nobody could have imagined that South Africa in 30 years or 20 years would have moved from Mandela to Zuma as the new leader. Nobody would have imagined that Trinidad would have moved from Eric Williams to the present woman in Trinidad. What's your name, brother? Kama. That is my own people. I'm going to talk about them. Like I talk about y'all. You know, I'm not talking about. Nobody would have thought that what is going on in Mali, from Keto to the present tragedy in Mali, nobody would have estimated what happened in Rwanda and Burundi and these places, or Zimbabwe. We never anticipated. In other words, there's been an increasing decline in the leadership. So Garvey and Tony spoke about the coming of that tragic decline in leadership, in people without vision. And they did it and came to us with the argument that if we don't take that seriously and transform and bring to a stop that decline in leadership, where would we go? And he didn't say it out of that because Garvey had to deal with the Harlem Blood Brothers. He had to deal with the NAACP. He had to deal with a series of organizations that were built around that time, whether they were in Harlem or whether they were national organizations. All of them, and plus the incompetent leadership that he had, who were in charge of the building, what's the 4 ships? What they call it? Help me out.
Steamship.
The steamship. He had incompetent people. And they were corrupt. Now, we are faced with the same kind of people today in our businesses. In our countries, we are faced with one, incompetent people and corrupt people. And Tony was prepared to say that. That is the tragedy that we are faced with. And he was prepared to talk about that. We don't have those conversations at home. It's so easy to talk about LeBron James. It's so easy to talk about my boy, what they call him. What they call him? What they call about Ray Lewis. It's so easy to talk about Ray Lewis at Baltimore, but not to sit down at home with a group of people or come to these places and say, yes, Ray Lewis is a great leader, but what about the leadership of Ghana? Or what about Garvey? What about the leadership in Jamaica and Trinidad? We are seeing the leadership slide away. All right, we're seeing that slide away everywhere. And when a black man, because that's another great problem we have to deal with, the mulatto man. When a black mulatto man, listen to me now, when a black mulatto man, good, from Brazil, who never went to college, who was just a high school degree, became president of 200 million people that were poor and impoverished and not doing well economically and otherwise. When he took over the government, all of us who have been to Bahia and to Rio de Janeiro and all over Brazil still could not see that man as a black man. We did not see him as a black man. We saw him as something else. And when that man, without a college education, took the Brazilian economy and turned it around, turned around poverty, raised the economic, the gross national product, and did extraordinarily well, so that Brazil is among one of the top nations in the world today. When he did that, none of us stopped to think that in no country that we know that is African, just as we didn't like Garvey because he was an uneducated man. And that's what we said about him. That's what Du Bois and all the others, Philip Randolph and all said about, that he was an uneducated fool. And he didn't know what he was talking about. How now when the only leader in the world today without a college education is the one who has performed the best. And when he was finished, he was able to take a woman who spent 13 years in jail and make her the new president. Where could you have that anywhere? And if Lula was running for mayor of Washington, D.C., none of us would vote for him because he only had a high school education. And none of us would have voted for the woman that he brought on because she went to jail for 13 years. We must understand that Garvey was talking about that world. We didn't like Garvey because he was not one of us who feels so educated, so brilliant, so above the rest that poverty does not even enter into our language, that illiteracy does not even enter into our responsibility, that understanding of a non-Christian ethic does not allow us to be able to converse with the other. Tony Martin understood all of that, and the issues that he raised in order to tell us who he is and who others like him are. That issue helped him to bring to us a truth that we should say. One last thing I want to say. Somebody mentioned John Henry Clark. In one of John Henry Clark books, he makes a reference to something Garvey said that I thought was so nice, and I think it applies to Tony. The talk about Marcus Garvey being radical. That's what Tony was, radical. The talk about Marcus Garvey being radical. How can a Negro be conservative? You must ask the president of Howard University that. You must ask Pat Swaggart and all these others that question. How can they be conservative? It's not whether they're Democratic or Republican. How can they be conservative? Listen to what he says. What has he or she to conserve? Garvey was right on it. And my boy Rice put it down there. I said, my God, check this out. What have you, meaning us, but pain, suffering, and hardship? It is time for the Negro to be radical and to let the world know what he wants. That is Malcolm X. That is George Jackson. That is Martin Luther King. It is time for us to do that. Not tomorrow, not next week, not putting it off and all that. It is time for us to do that. Because if you're not your own reality, if you're not prepared to stand up and demand your sovereignty, not just freedom is interesting, you know, and independence is interesting, but sovereignty. Because if you don't have your sovereignty, it means that you're on somebody's paycheck. And this boy never remained, Tony never remained on anybody. I grew up with his family. As a matter of fact, his aunt was one of the greatest piano players. I don't know if you all know those people who like jazz. Hazel Scott, who was once married to Adam Clayton Powell, was his aunt. The Martin family, his brother is a painter, and his other brother is a filmmaker like Haile Garima. These people, all I grew up with, all of them were brilliant. The Martin people were brilliant, and they were committed. He didn't become a Garveyite or didn't become a black person when he got here. He was always that in that Garvey family. I mean, in that Martin family. I know them. They were incredible people. They're classy boys. Like my boy here sitting down. They're not like, I went to St. Mary's and it was a Catholic school, and you know, they wanted me to be an altar boy and try to alter me. I should have gone to QRC. I was really a QRC boy who went to St. Mary's. I went to the wrong school. So I had to give my brother credit here. But Tony went. Tony was powerful. And I wanted to finish by saying that just as it appears that in Trinidad, in Jamaica, in Haiti, in the United States of America, and in South Africa, in the Congo, that we produce these great men and women who have led us. The challenge of the time is how do we take the vision of those men and women and extend it beyond our immediate progress. And make it, because the 21st century has got to be our century. If we don't do it in the 21st century, it's going to become hard in the 22nd century. The Chinese and the Indians did it in the 20th century. The Americans did it in the 19th century. If we don't do it in the 21st century, the 22nd century is going to be a nightmare for our grandchildren and children. So it depends upon those of us not only who read Tony, not only who study Tony, not only who converse about what Tony has done, who not only becomes immersed in the spirit of Tony, but it becomes necessary for all of us in here today to multiply this geometrically, so that tomorrow Tony can, as an ancestor, can say to himself with a big smile, they have followed the path, the way, the truth, and the light.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Let's have a hearty and more hearty round of applause for our brother Acklin Lynch. He deserves it. Indeed. And I might add, he's one of the other brothers, a very strong, stalwart giant living among us. And we need to, I always tell people that I believe in giving people their flowers while they're still here. I recall about 2 years ago, Brother Kalanji had turned 80. And we gave him a wonderful surprise, you know, to celebrate his Earth Strong. And so that's what we're talking about. The next speaker on the panel I would like to introduce is Sister Wangaza Bandele. Let's hear it from Sister.
Can you all hear okay? Does that work? So I want to just thank you for being here. I want to just give all praises and honor to Singor and the UNIA and other organizers for allowing this to be, and of course for Shrikiana and Holly for hosting us. There's so much that occurs to allow for this, and there aren't enough thank yous in my estimation, so I want to just add my thank you to the mix. So, you know, this is always a pleasure to have an opportunity to share with ourselves about that aspect of who we are that is so great. And as we honor, as we memorialize Tony Martin, that's really what we're doing. We're looking at a man who I was blessed to know. I know his works better than I know him, but I certainly met him on a number of occasions, heard him on many occasions, and really fell in love with the meticulousness of his research. You know, there are scholars, there are historians, there are writers, and there are those who just frame their work in such a way that, you know, you don't have no way to go but forward in the way that they're delivering the information, the message that they are putting forth. So he just is extraordinary, has always been extraordinary in that way, in my estimation. And so this conversation about Tony, about the work that he's done, about his actually serving as what I say might be a bridge in our understanding and locating the UNIA is enormous. He gave us memory of ourselves. He gave us memory not simply of an aspect of who we are, but the best of who we are. He allowed us through his writing to look into those books, to hear his words, to remember someone by the name of Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, and understand that because of who he was and what he did, we can be no less. And so that kind of choosing that Tony actually committed himself to, I say is choosing higher. I say, I don't know how many times he looked in the mirror, but I know that he made some very conscious decisions in his life. And principally, we're talking about honoring his calling. And so what I want to just spend the next few minutes talking to you about is how he honored his calling and how are you honoring yours. See, you know, to have these events, and many of you who have been around for a while, Senghor and others know, there's been a period in my life when I just stopped coming out to these kinds of events. You know, nationalist to the core, that's who I am. Always, always, always advocating for my people, and just, you know, dizzy by the talk. There comes a time when there's nothing to do but to be the thing. There comes a time when, yes, you do talk, you do have that conversation, you do listen and actually retrieve the information that's required such that you can honor your calling, give your gift, figure that thing out. Like, how much time can we take so that we can be in our day-to-day living that which honors Tony Martin. So, choosing higher. Moment to moment it occurs. Moment to moment we get to decide what we're going to eat. So how did you honor yourself today at that eating table? That's what I'm talking about. This stuff is not that difficult. It's not deep, it's not so profound. It's only as deep and profound as we make it, but it really boils down to our moment to moment choosing. So how did you choose to leave your house today? That is, how were the people that you left when you closed that door? How did you choose to honor your children or not? How did you choose when you came down here to buy the 2 books or the 3 books or 4 books? How did you do that? Have you done that yet? See, this conversation often is like out there, but I say it's one that lives right in you. Someone said earlier we can turn this thing around in 24 hours. I say we can turn it around in this moment. When we choose to have the conversations with ourselves, to stop the script that others are playing for us, to absolutely program our days so that what we choose, consciously thinking, is the order, is the schedule, is the script, is the map that we follow in our everyday. Because unless and until that happens, it really is just kind of like talk. Ways, how can we do that? And I'm just going to share a few of the ideas that might stimulate us to carry this memorial to Tony such that we become the icon. We become the beacon. Not the one that has a switch that you turn off and on, but you be that thing 24/7. So what would it be like, for instance, if you just did a t-shirt with Tony's picture on it and a message on the back? You know, I'm in the whirlwind. How about that?
Yeah.
See, oftentimes we get locked up in conversations about how we don't have enough money. We can't really be the one. I'm waiting on him to come. You know, I'm waiting for the money to check, the job, the schooling, all of that. Which is really, I say, a conversation that has us spinning wheels going nowhere. But the rational mind, and you know how creative our minds are. These black minds so fantastic. We can rationally think our way, convince ourselves out of doing us. Saying that it's supposed to be done on the outside. This is an inside job, and it's an everyday job.
That's right.
And so what if you just did that? How many times would maybe somebody walk up to you and say, well, what is that on your shirt? What's that about? How about that? How about if you just changed your screensaver when you went home tonight? How about you just, so that every time you opened up your computer or you looked at your phone, you saw Tony Martin's image, or you saw a great quote from the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. How about that?
Yeah.
How about if you, I don't know, created we have a Wednesday where we celebrate with the Institute of Karmic Guidance, right, Tony? Wisdom Wednesday. How about we have a Tony Tuesday in your life? It's stuff that don't take no money. It don't take nothing but your determination and your will to move beyond the talk and actually into the walk. Like taking the steps, taking the action that's required, such that this memorial really becomes a way of being in our lives. And then there becomes less to remember about Tony, about the UNIA, and more to experience, because we're creating it. We're creating what he's talked about. It's not like here, it's like here. And we absolutely have the ability to do it because we do it for everybody else, every day. So like, what if, y'all feeling me on this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about you write a paper? How many students we have in here? Howard students, UDC students. How many? We don't have any students in here? I know they're here. It's okay. You can identify yourself. So what if you decided that every opportunity that you had, at least once every academic semester, you were going to devote one of your assignments to studying, memorializing, bringing forth your knowledge around Tony Martin? How about that? How about if you were to write a letter to his son? Write a letter to this man's son, who's what, 6 years old? Okay, how about giving him something he can hold on to every day? About the gift that his father has been to the world. Something that uplifts him and has him place both of his feet firmly in the tracks of his daddy. How about that? How about you write his wife? How about you let her know that for all the good that she shared with him, she absolutely provided a place for him to be who he was in a magnificent way for as long as that was to occur. How about if we, I don't know, how many techies we have in the room? Techies. In this world of Facebook and Twitter and apps, and how about you create an app, a Tony Martin app? Apps are not that, application. How about you open up your phone and you can have a Tony app that identifies all of his works, that begins to, you can download speeches, that provides you access to him, such that you can walk in an inspired way. You got your equipment, you like strapped. So like whatever happens in your day-to-day, you got, you're fortified. How about that? We got, how many apps you got on your phone now? And how do they serve you? It's not difficult. How about if you just simply talk less and do more? How about you just have a silent Tuesday day, where it is your doing that memorializes him and not speak a word. Where nobody may not know but you. How does that fortify your soul? This is truly a ancestral moment. When we gather to honor Tony as an ancestor, we honor not just him, because he is in the process of joining a pantheon of greats that sustain us. The song, the drumming that Brother Sadiq brought earlier, it's so much more than a good feeling and entertainment. It really is who we are. We are hardwired in this way. What do I mean by that? I mean that honoring our ancestors is what we are supposed to do to complete ourselves. Sometimes we are perhaps in a way, in a state that says, you know, something's not off or something's not quite right, and we don't know quite what it might be. And I say to you today that creating your altar in your space, in your home, no matter how you choose to do that, as long as it's clean and it's straightforward, a place, a sacred place, where you can go into your sacred place, where you can join with the sacred place, the inward with the outer, and be in one and be in tune and be on your path. How about that? How many have altars in their homes? Okay. And how many of us routinely commune in such a way that we're fortified? I know this is stuff we ain't supposed to really talk about like that, right? But this, I say, is the untold number of ancestral spirits who are waiting for us for the hookup. And one way to do that is to actually be at the altar, light the candle, put the water down. I follow a kind traditions. I'm not talking from that which I have read. It works. And so I invite you, in closing, to consider who it is that you will choose to be. In memorial to Tony, in memorial to your ancestry. Who will you be in such a way that this talk lives forever, outwardly? So that when you're passing brothers and sisters on the street who may not know, don't have a clue about who a Tony Martin was, that they will be informed. Who will you be such that you dedicate the next lunch with your friend, your sister, your brother, your love interest to Tony Martin? Let's have a Tony Martin lunch. How about that? Well, ain't nothing special about the day. Yeah, I know that. That's why we're going to have it. That's exactly why we're going to have it. We don't have to wait for someone else to call us to action. How about if we do that? I know that that is what is being called for. I say this is the dawning of the era of the new movement. The movement that has less to do with out there and has everything to do with right here. We talk about being free and sovereign. Sovereignty here is the only thing that begets sovereignty elsewhere. And what I mean by that is, how ready are you to stand up and speak your truth? Do you do that well without permission? Like what if you lose your job tomorrow? The one that you call your job. Have you thought through how I'm going to sustain myself? I'm going to tell you something. If Mrs. Fields and the Girl Scouts, and you know, it's a cookie. Everybody can do something to sustain themselves, to get themselves off that plantation so that you can fully be yourself. And as long as we are connected in that way, we really are hampered. And if you don't know just how to do that, sit at the altar, ask for the direction, take action, and it will unfold. So this new movement I'm referring to has to, again, to do with who we're going to be, moment to moment in our choosing. We have so much information that we can access that provides guidance. We have so much, you know, music and imagery, and we really, really have, I say, all that we need. I think we have more than we need. And if that is the case, if you can know your abundance, if you can see your abundance when you look around, because there's a conversation about lack that pervades our community. And I say that you see what you see, you be with what is, and you don't have to actually be a contribution to that conversation that takes you away from what you want. You see it and you act on it in a way that actually brings you what you want. That you don't have to talk about that, because that doesn't serve us. So I'm really going to close now, and I'm really going to just leave you with this. You are each such a blessing. You are each such a reservoir of unlimited resource. And I invite you to simply look inward more. Look outward less, look inward more. Partner with like-minded people. And be in this moment all of who I say God intends for you to be. You are more than enough. Whatever that thing is you've been wishing for, that you've been calling for, that we need to do, and black folks got to buy, and whatever, you're it. You're it. And let that be your memorial to Tony Martin. I appreciate you. Thank you so very much.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Sister Wangaza Bandele. Give it up one more time. Yeah. Indeed. All right, I learned earlier, someone drew it to my attention that you folks in the back could hardly hear. Can you hear me? I think maybe it's a difference between the two mics, so what I think I'll do is I'll switch up the microphones, okay? The last but not least speaker I'm going to introduce to you is another giant, again, that still walks among us, standing tall for all of us African people. Let's hear it for our brother Tony Browder.
I want to say that Brother Tony Martin really lived up to the spiritual essence of his name. The name Tony is, derived from the word Anthony, and it's a word that means, and I say this not just because my name is Tony Anthony, but and you're supposed to know who you are.
That's right.
The word Anthony means of inestimable value, priceless. And even though the name is linked to Catholicism, the essence of the name goes beyond Catholicism, because St. Anthony was one of the first saints. The first monastery in the world was named in honor of St. Anthony, and it was built in Egypt. And St. Anthony is known to Catholics as the finder of lost things and lost people. And that is what Tony dedicated his life to, finding the knowledge of the lost people and presenting that information to us so that we can free our minds, clear our minds, and be who we were intended to be. So the essence of why we're here to honor him is because he stands in line with the whole host of brothers and sisters who did the same thing. Dedicated their lives to researching us and then presenting that information to us so that we would know who we were and move through this world with as little confusion as possible. But that's a difficult thing to do, because it's hard to live in this country and be an African.
That's right.
When we're constantly being bombarded with non-African essence everywhere we go. I can remember the first time I spoke to John G. Jackson. And John G. Jackson was my real introduction to African history. I read his book, Introduction to African Civilization, and fell in love with that man. So when I had an opportunity to call him up on the phone and have a conversation with him, he talked about his life, and just listening to this man, I realized that I was talking to a genius, a man with a photographic memory, who could recall events that happened 40 years ago and describe them in detail as if they just happened 5 minutes ago. And I listened to him talk about his life and all of the phenomenal people that he met. But then he said, and this was in '87 when I had this conversation with him. He was up in age and he was living in a efficiency apartment on the south side of Chicago. And he was very bitter. And he said to me that if I had to do it all over again, I would pass for white. He was despondent because he dedicated his life to researching the history of his people, presenting that information to his people, and he didn't feel that we were listening to him, responding to the knowledge that he had dedicated his life to. I remember when Adasi brought John Henry Clark to UDC, gave a phenomenal lesson. During the question and answer session, someone asked him, with Dr. Clark, what should we be doing? He said, I've been telling you for the last 2 hours what we should be doing. Everyone has been talking about what we should be doing. And we're tired of talking. It's time for us, as my sister said, it's time for us to do. We know what to do, we're just afraid. We know what to do. Others have told us and have been telling us for decades, for hundreds of years, what to do, but we're afraid. What are we afraid of? We're afraid of the thoughts that others have planted into our consciousness. That's all they are, just thoughts that someone has planted into our consciousness after they removed our original thought and taught us to believe in the lie and accept it as our truth. I first was introduced to Tony Martin through his book, The Jewish Onslaught, when he was courageous enough to take on the Jews during the late 80s and early 90s, when they saw what we were attempting to do, what we were doing in the late 80s and early 90s through the advent of the African-centered movement. The last thing in the world they wanted us to do was to regain our African consciousness. So they then appointed lapdogs, like Henry Skip the Truth Gates, to tear down everything that Tony Martin was saying, to tear down everything that John Henry Clark was saying, Malefe Asante and others. So, but we can't, you know, just focus our attention on the Jewish onslaught and forget about the Christian onslaught. We can't forget about the Islamic onslaught. We can't forget about the fact that everybody who didn't look like us was trying to separate us from ourselves.
That's right.
And have been unrepentant about doing that. So the question remains now, what are we going to do? We've come here today to remember Tony Martin, but what are we going to do when we leave here?
Good question.
What are we going to do to carry on his legacy? Because all these brothers and sisters who have written books, who have lectured, who have dedicated their lives, who spent time away from their wives and their children to research and to speak to audiences all around the country, did that for us. So how are we going to honor them when they're no longer here?
That's right.
We carry their memory with us. And the best way we can honor them is to act on the words and the messages that they gave us. I've been living here in D.C. for almost 42 years. And I've seen more changes in D.C. the last 5 years than I have the last 42 years. How much longer will we have Sankofa? Because there's an effort right now to take away this building. There's an effort right now to tear down everything that once existed here on Georgia Avenue. And if we don't stand up and fight this onslaught, it's a Jewish onslaught, it's a Christian onslaught. If we don't fight this onslaught, there will be nothing here to indicate what we did 20 years from now. Nothing. So if we don't begin to love ourselves,
That's right.
and love those men and those women who have dedicated their lives to teaching us to love ourselves, then we only have ourselves to blame. We have to start talking less and begin doing more consistently. That is what counts. My sister said, and my brother said, that we can change things overnight if we change our minds. It all begins right here. It all begins with you knowing who you are and refusing to accept someone else's limited definition of your capacity as a human being. Because when you know who you are, it instills within you a sense of fearlessness. And that's what Tony Martin demonstrated throughout his life, a sense of fearlessness. So if you die, and we all are going to die at some point in time in our lives, then at least die for something. Die standing up for something. Die and leave a memory behind so that those who come behind you can say, yes, I want to follow in that person's footsteps. Leave a trail. That's why we are here. And one of the things that we have to do as we continue to come together to honor those brothers and sisters who are leaving us. This Saturday we're going to be honoring Brother Kalonji. And I would imagine within the next week or so we'll be honoring Professor Donald Byrd. And then there'll be others to be honored. But one of the things that I want us to truly begin to understand is to put out of our minds the Judeo-Christian concepts of heaven and hell. Because the reality is, they don't exist. They do not exist. If we understand the essence of what our ancestors taught us, there is life after life. The book of coming forth by day, or the book of coming forth, the words to say in order to ensure that your soul will come forth into a new life. That's what it's all about. We are our ancestors. They live in us. They are looking for conscious bodies who have prepared themselves and have a sound mind that they can move into and move through in order to continue their work. They live in us. They wait for us to align ourselves with their thinking so that they will have a vessel to possess. You know, and I love, since we're in the house of Sankofa, I love the opening of that film, Sankofa. Spirit of the dead, rise up and possess your bird of passage. We are the bird of passage. So we pour libation to invite the spirits of our ancestors to come forth and to choose us to continue their great and mighty walk. That is the relationship between us and them. They are not gone. They are always here. So we gather in events like this today to remember them. To remember them, like a set remembered a star. To put everything that they devoted their life to together so it becomes one. It becomes real. It becomes whole to us. And it is the mirror through which we will look and evaluate our own lives. We don't have to imitate anybody else's so-called reality. We have the first model of reality. So all we need to do is be true to ourselves, be true to our concept of God, be true to our native land, and only then will we be free. Ashe?
Whoa, y'all put another hand together for the panelists. And, and you know, I think y'all got some homework. You got some assignments. And like, listen, I would like for the committee that's taking the lead for you to honor my brother, Baba Kalonji Olusegun, who was with us for 82 years here, to stand up for me for a minute. And I know Tony, stand up, come on. Ikichi, Imamu, it's a lot of others, but what I want y'all to understand right now is we've taken on the work that we must all take on to support Mama Kupenda, Olusegun, and the family. We're asking for you to do something like Mama Magazi was telling us to us. Do it now. Give us some financial support. And if you can't do it here right now, see one of us. We'll tell you how you can do it. Next Saturday at Plymouth Congregational Church, a celebration of life will be held at 11 a.m. For those from out of town, please communicate with us and we'll let you know, because you're going to hear more about Tony Martin, Kalonji Olusegun, and all those that are in transition and those that are gone before us. Because it's our duty being here now not to let down those who've gone before us and not to let those down who are coming behind us. Y'all understand the importance of us being the bridge? But you got to be in the spirit of the doo-doo. So we are not only organizing to hold a celebration, we're calling on the African community to collectively come together. Go online. Mama Nkechi, come on up for a second, real quick, please. Come on, Mama Nkechi. Go online and support us. Today you can see Baba Kumba. Come up for a minute. Brother Carr, my cousin, come on up here. I told you I would call you. Come on, Carr. Cousin Carr, Professor Carr, come up. Mama Nkechi, can you and Mama tell people what they can do with Blue Nile, with PayPal, with a check today, how they can be supportive of that. And I want y'all to know that Dr. Tony Martin is going to continue to be honored. On the 15th, Friday the 15th, we're going to do a 2-hour international broadcast with some people in Trinidad who grew up with him, and Brother Nati, who distributed his books. And I will be in Philadelphia on the 24th, and on the 25th is his 40-day rights. So you're going to hear more, but you also have to understand, this community was blessed for many years with Baba Kalanji, who was the vice president of the Republic of New Africa, was also a founding charter member of the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division, was a tailor, was an inventor, was the best cook and the best salad maker, who is now on his way transitioning. And we want to make sure that the Olusegun family is taken well care of from now on. Y'all hear what I'm saying? Because while he was here, he took good care of us in many, many ways. And this is not a memorial right now. Come to the life service and hear how you can be supportive of that. It's important. It is important, because if you can't do for those, my mother been all over me for the last 3 months, and she left in 2003. Every morning, every night, telling me things like she used to tell me things when she was here. And I ain't gonna let her down. That's what Singo means, descendant of the ancestors. It ain't about me or she, it's about we, collectivity. Passing it on to Mama Nkechi.
Let's give it up for Brother Singo. This brother has been in the leadership of helping to organize the Baba Kalanji Olusegun Memorial Fund to help to put on the service that's going to be February 16th, as well as the VPAS. We need donations. Brother, my brain is just lost me. My brother Ackland has just given me a check for $100. He said, Sister Nkechi, who do you make the check out to? The check is to be made out to the African Freedom Fund Treasury. The African Freedom Fund Treasury. Make your check out for whatever amount you want to make it to the African Freedom Fund Treasury, because it will be used for the service. All funds over and above what is needed for specific expenses will be turned over to Sister Kupenda Olusegun, Brother Kalanji's wife. If you're not able to give a check or cash today, still make it out to African Freedom Fund Treasury and mail to P.O. Box 10010, Washington, D.C. 20018. That's the P.O. Box for the African Freedom Fund. Right down the street, Blue Nile Trading Company. You can drop off, up the street, you can drop off your cash donations or your checks there. Make sure that it's known that it's for the Kalanji Olusegun Fund. If you wanted to have a card or a little note to Kupenda, that will get to her as well. When I came in, Brother Sidrak gave me an envelope with a check and with a card. The check will be going to the African Freedom Fund, and the card will be going to Mama Kupenda. I'm going to turn it over to Brother Imamu right now, so he can just tell you anything that I left out. But I just want to say, Brother Kalanji was a staunch Garveyite. He was a staunch nationalist with the Republic of New Africa. He was a staunch organizer within COBA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. His voice was resounded all over the world on WPFW, morning meeting and everything else. Baba Kalanji was definitely an institution in this community, and we need to honor him. We need to give tribute. We need to give praise. Hopefully we will see everybody on February 16th at Plymouth as we honor Baba Kalanji. And I'm going to turn it over to Brother Imamu, who is the president of the African Freedom Fund Treasury.
All right. Greetings, family. I can't say nothing more than what Mama Keisha said, the way you can send your donations. And we're going to miss Baba Kalanji, but we know his spirit going to live on within us at all times with that beautiful spirit of Baba Kalanji Olusegun, Asante Sanla. So did you get the information again? We can give it out. P.O. Box 10011.
10010.
111.
Then I can give it out tomorrow.
All right. 111 P.O. Box 10011, and the zip is 20018.
PayPal.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
PayPal, also for those of us who have entered the 21st century, you can go online. Oh, that's right. You can go online. If you have a PayPal account, go to your PayPal account and you put in the email address babakalanjifund@gmail.com. Baba Kalanji Fund, FUND@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page as well, the Kalanji Olusegun memorial page. If you just put it in the Facebook search line, it'll come up. And there's also a Facebook ceremony.
So also you all, we are closing out, but it's very important for you to, if you want to order in the cafe, you need to do that now because they're going to be closing soon. Buy a book, but come see one of us if you got any other questions about the Baba Kalanji Memorial, and get with us. Let us know. Give us some. Also, give us some love. I'm talking about when your sister laid it out for us. Yeah. When you leave here, I'm gonna tell. Hey, listen to this. Listen to this, y'all. Tony and I were there when Baba Kalanji took his last breath on this side. And I want to tell you all, we were there to support the family, and several of us were there. The experience was unlike any experience I've ever seen in my life. I've been around a lot of elders that have transitioned, but what we felt from the ancestral realm while we were there, because it took some time, and the experience with Brother Ab there playing music, and Mama, Sister Kupinda, and the love that was there. See, if you go home and meditate, because we meditated there, we were in silence there longer than we were talking. And when I left there, I couldn't go to sleep. I mean, because the energy was like that. And Tony knows exactly what I'm talking about, and you're going to hear more about that. But that was a lesson for us of experiencing. I, as a Reiki person, went in the room and did Reiki. Trust me, Baba Kalanji did Reiki back on me and had me moving. While they say he was unconscious, but his vibes were totally different. Was that not right, Tony? So what I want you to understand is, he is now transcending and he's watching. And we want to take care of his queen and family and take care of him and to revere him, because the life after life is so important. Brother Carr, and thank y'all. Y'all please, when you're leaving, because we're closing out, but when you're leaving, buy a book from Sankofa. Hug somebody, give somebody some black love. Because I'm going to tell you something, if we really love ourselves hard enough and right enough, we will love this planet back to where it's supposed to be.
That's right.
Brother Carr, we talked all day long about great professors. I want, and I'm going to call him, I'm going to say it, a lot of people don't know this, but we distant cousins, because my mother's maiden name was Carr, like Professor Carr. Please come up, Professor Carr. Please come up. And what I'm going to ask Professor Carr to do, and y'all who don't know that all opportunities are not lost. We got some of the baddest professors around right with us that can withstand Howard University and deal with it. And this brother is no joke in terms of carrying on the legacies of those who've come before him. And he's one of many. There's some others too, by the way. But I'm going to put him on the spot since he's here. Dr. Carr, just have a few words for us. Please, Bob.
Thank you, Baba. No. I'm gonna be very brief. I came to just be in the community for this ritual, and I want to thank you all, because I got here. There's some things, the students, and there were some Howard students here. They were around the corner. Each place was packed. So, just listening. Thank you. And the action steps, what to do. I mean, I didn't know Brother Tony for decade after decade, like my Baba, Dr. Lynch. I knew him about 20 years. And I tell you, it wasn't race first for me. The book, in fact, was African fundamentalism. Because if we know, and I'm sure it was talked about a little earlier, the context in which Tony Martin's work came into existence, when we look at before Tony Martin, you've got David Crowson with Black Moses. Well, you had Amy Jacques Garvey, Garvey and Garveyism, putting that book in every HBCU in the country and around the world, even as Amy Ashwood had gone to London and then Ghana, and I'm sure that history has been going over. But what you had Robert Hill working on the Marcus Garvey papers, but what you had in Tony Martin was a person who, as Brother Tony has said, had the highest standard of scholarship and recovered. That's exactly right. And so, you know, when I was reading Literary Garveyism, which was his collection of stuff out of Garvey publications, Negro World, Black Man, that's when I got introduced to Hubert Henry Harrison. I'd heard John Jackson talk about him, I'd heard John Henry Clark talk about him. It was Tony Martin that began to put things in place. Tony Martin displaced the narrative of the Crisis magazine. People talk about the Crisis magazine and its literary competitions, but it was Tony Martin and Literary Garveyism that showed us the primary documents. He was indeed, Tony, a recoverer of documents. And then Literary Garveyism, that led me to Literary Garveyism, and then that led me, so I got to meet this cat. So we brought him to Ohio State. It's around 91. I went to get him at the airport. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, I never met Nat King Cole, but I always tell my students that they're the two coolest black men I've ever been aware of. One was Nat Cole, who I'd never met, and the other one was Tony Martin. This was the coolest black man. I'm telling you. And then, of course, as you said, Brother Tony, when he put out the Jewish Onslaught, see, there was a little obscure classics professor at Wellesley College named Mary Lefkowitz, who the world knew nothing of. And between the harassment Tony got at Wellesley, when he bit back, that's one of the things that promoted her to national, international prominence. He should still be giving his family some money behind the money that Mary Lefkowitz made on the pimp game between she and dealing with Tony Martin and John Henry Clark. But Tony Martin fought back. And Tony Martin, if you remember, Arthur Schlesinger wrote his book, The Disuniting of America. And Tony Martin, on the hit list, as Tony has said, of these scholars who were being attacked, but Tony Martin had the majority press. That's who put these books out. So Tony not only wrote the books, he published the books. And then, of course, I don't know, something about that island of Trinidad, and something about those islands, Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know what it is about Bob and I.T. and Tony Martin and Ackland Lynch, but something in the soil there of maroonage creates this tradition. So they can't just be quiet. They just go to war. And so not only did he write the books and publish the books, he's got the connections to distribute the books. I think A&B Publishers was in Brooklyn at the time, and then Bob and I.T. is down here. In some kind of way, these books got all over the world, and they backed up off Tony Martin. Now, Sister Banneker, you said the truth. This social media is real. And these kids on Twitter, since Tony Martin made his transition, there's been a group of folks who were his students at Wellesley, and they've been tweeting and talking about Tony Martin. Now this is in the heart of what they create, if there are any black people, Negroes. But they loved Tony Martin. And they embraced Tony Martin. In fact, they were tweeting a picture of Tony with Shaka, I guess it's his son, in one of the local newspapers when they threw him a retirement party. But they didn't realize Tony wasn't retiring. Finally got my hands on that last book Tony did on Caribbean history. Tony had been talking about that for the longest. And I'm going to wind this up really because there are any number of things I could say about Tony. I'll give you just a couple more points. But this book in many ways was the book he'd been writing his whole life. That's right. In other words, Garvey was his project, was in his spirit. Garvey, I've seen Garvey reach out to Tony Martin and reach out to everybody who was in the presence of Tony. I'll tell you about that in a second. This is the last thing I'll say. But he wrote about the Caribbean because that was not only his region, it was the way he looked at Africa. And he carried that wherever he went. Wow. Tony Martin, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, Tony Martin was the international representative for the Caribbean. And now I'm looking at it and I've seen one of the finest historians that we produced. Brother Larry Crow was sitting there all quiet. Now he knew Tony a lot, really. He's standing, put your hand up, at least stand up for a second, Larry. Everybody can see Larry Crow. This is the brother, if you've ever seen the History Makers, any of the History Makers shows or interviews, Larry Crow, he's the architect of that. He's asked most of those questions, and he's been the one behind the film. If you've seen A Great and Mighty Walk, John Henry Clark, Larry Crow was part of the brain trust to put together those questions. I'm sure I got to blow you up like that, brother, because we need to understand how that works in the Midwest. But so the organization, one of the organizations we've been involved with for years, and of course Tony for years, long distance runner with ASCAC. When we put together the African World History Project, the preliminary challenge volume. If you look in that book, in the notes, Tony Martin doesn't have a chapter in the World History Project. What he has, however, is he came to Detroit for the planning meetings and put the intellectual frame, help us put that frame together. This was a brother who, if he didn't have a source for it, if he couldn't document it, he didn't say it. But if you understand what he did, once he had the sources, he put a narrative together that knocked the Garvey scholarship completely off his edge. David Cronin was the Bible to a lot of white folks. And now they deal with Tony Martin either with respect or with silence. And so race first again. And so the last thing I'll say is that, I guess around 1994, we were in Los Angeles for ASCAC conference, Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Tony Martin was closing us out. It's a Sunday morning. We were gathered, and you know, Tony, as cool as he was, always immaculately dressed, always, you know, just pristine, standing ramrod straight, but somehow looked like he was swagging at the same time. Just standing there, he's talking about Marcus Garvey, and he's going through the scholarship. This was one of two major addresses. He addressed ASCAC many times, but he addressed us years later when he talked about Amy Ashwood Garvey in the book Amy Ashwood Garvey, Wife Number One, which is an incredible book, really. But he's sitting here talking about Garvey, and all of a sudden, the ground started to shake. Yeah, this was 94. It's when the earthquake hit LA. Sunday morning, I'll never forget it. Everybody's in the hall. I'm talking about hundreds of people there. He's standing up there, and then Marcus Garvey would tell us, and he's going on, he's talking about Garvey, and he's talking about Garvey, and then the ground started shaking, and he put his hand right there on the podium, and the ground started shaking. And he did what Tony Martin does when things get a little too excited. He just got stone quiet. He stood there. Negroes is diving, Negroes is calling the Orisha or whatever. It subsided. Now, you know, we know enough to know an earthquake, aftershock come after earthquake. So now, you know, this thing could panic. But everybody got eyes fixed on Tony because he ain't moved. Tony said, Marcus Garvey said, look for him in the whirlwind, and the whole crowd just erupted. He continued his talk. Yeah, this is Garvey. That's all it was. I'm telling you right now, last thing I'll say, this brother, what you all said is so true. He's here.
That's right.
He's never going anywhere. He's with all the other ancestors. As Marcus Garvey said, and you know, I guess this week marked, I think it was the 9th, the day they picked him up at the 125th Street Station and took Marcus Garvey to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and put him in jail. Garvey said, look for me in the whirlwind. And that's where Tony Martin came from. That's where everybody here has come from. And that's certainly where we not only come from, but what we'll return to. And these white folks better understand something about us. We're not going down like this. So I mean, thank you.
I just knew. I mean, you know, a lot of people don't know, and y'all know the trail of my brother here from Philly, right? But a lot of people don't know that some of us old heads and older heads, we got some younger heads that ain't no joke. And I'm not just stroking my brother. He knows what I'm talking about. This brother is no, y'all heard it just now, but you just got a little taste. Y'all know why all the Howard students love this professor? Because he speaks truth to power. He does his research, and I appreciate that because you carrying on the legacy to make sure that that next generation, no, I know, but that next generation, the one that you said is around the corner that's over in the cafe, that's what I'm talking about. And it's important that we have professors, and Dr. Ackland Lynch was very clear, we got to hold the feet to the fire of all the teachers, all the professors, so they do it the right way, right? And I've seen this brother in action, okay? And Tony and my brother, who's a traveling ambassador to UNIA-ACL, Dr. Runoko Rashidi, who will be back with us on the 15th of March, said to me that when he was in Australia with Dr. Tony Martin, he knew right then that there's nobody on the planet that could tell him anything about Garvey and the UNIA other than Tony. That's right. And Runoko's traveled over 104 places. And he said people where he goes that know Garvey and the UNIA know Tony Martin. In other words, and let me just close on this. This is important. When in 2003, when the African Union started this talk about opening the door to the diaspora, it's two people I called up aside from other UNIA people, and it was Dr. Runoko Rashidi and Tony Martin. Runoko told me, I don't know what they're doing, Senghor, but Dr. Tony Martin told me, I know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to stop the real Africans from coming in the door. because he went to the conferences. I'm talking about the so-called intellectual conferences before it became a movement and went out in the world. So I want y'all to understand something about Tony. Tony was not just a great professor. Tony Martin was not. He was a downright like brother that sat by the door with the brothers. Like Walter Raleigh say, meeting with the brothers, ground with the brothers. I got to ground with Tony like that. Where Tony would take his jacket off, we would be in the building, and some people will appreciate this, in Liberty Hall. And we ran into the drums from the parades of the 30s in Philly. And Tony and Sister Khadijah, who was the first president of Division 330 here in Washington, D.C., lady president, who is now with the Atlanta Division, she was there with us, and a couple other brothers. I don't know, were you there at that time, brother? I think you were there that time. Well, anyway, we went to Philly, and we partied in the basement with the ancestors with the drums. Because that's how Tony was. I just want to show y'all, Tony knew how to come out his jacket and party a little bit too. That's why he was so cool. But anyway, I want to thank you all. I want to ask you all to each one meet one, each one greet one. I want to also call on you, join the UNIA. The UNIA is you.
That's right.
And if you don't join the UNIA is going to join a group that you're in. And if you're not in a group and you're here, something wrong.
That's right.
Because whether you with ADASI, the PGRNA, the UNIA, or any progressive group, all of those organizations must close ranks and come together. It's time for collaboration. Don't be content with the food of chickens. It's time for Africans to up, you mighty race. We can accomplish what we will. Thank you very much.
They're going to email out.
Just get with us, brother. Just get with me. Well, true. I know. And that's okay. We're coming back to it. We're going to find out that they deal with free zone and stuff. We're a government, though.